Hi, you are watching SightsIn Plus and this is Romesh Shivastu. Please to subscribe the channel for the HR news, for HR updates and conversation with the top-notch CHROs, thought leaders and business heads. Today we are going to discuss a very interesting subject, but that is not generative AI. We are going to discuss an equally important subject, that is skill-based hiring. If you look at the adoption of skill-based hiring, so according to Test Gorilla, around 73% companies globally are using skill-based hiring. To understand better what is skill-based hiring, how this works, and what are the challenges there, we have two senior HR leaders. Let me introduce Mr. Sahil Nayak. He's a HR thought leader and top human resources voice on LinkedIn. And Ms. Janani Prakaash. She is the head people and culture at Genzeon. So, Jenny, if I come to you first, so resume is dead, and this is the time for skill-based hiring. So, according to you, what is skill-based hiring in your understanding, and how it is different from the traditional hiring?
First of all, thank you for having me here, Romesh, and good to see my friend Sahil as well and talk along with him in this show. So let me just take an example because it's easy for everyone to understand. If you consider, let's say, talent hiring for banking and financial industry, we will look at people who have completed a Bachelor of Commerce or Chartered Accountancy or MBA in finance. These are the kind of profiles we would traditionally look, and that clearly answers that this is traditional hiring. Two, I'll tell you what happened during COVID in Hong Kong, especially when the COVID hit and the entire country, I mean, the entire world was trying to figure out things. What had happened was the entire banking and financial industry went through its own difficulties because expats had to move out of their jobs to their own mother countries, but people had to be there in that country to operate, right? This is one part. Simultaneously, the entire airline and hospitality industry was laying off people because they didn't know what to do with them. Now, Citigroup Hong Kong made a careful choice. I must say they took a possible risk, but it really helped them. What did they do? They went ahead and hired these airline industry staff because of their exceptional customer service skill. And then they trained them on banking and financials, especially to manage the wealth management portfolio, because the work has to run, isn't it? Now, this is a classic example for skill-based hiring. Now, is there a 100% fit? Absolutely not. But is there a 50-60% fit because customer service skill was important? The answer is yes. And how did this really help them? Their revenues rose. I think their credit card and wealth management customer base increased by 11% in a year. So this is just an example of skill-based hiring that I want to call out, right? Again, bringing it back to basics. Traditional hiring is going with qualifications, looking at which college people come from, what has been their past experience. To skill-based hiring is really looking at what is the job that's in hand, what are the skills required, and what kind of people can fulfill those skills. That's really what is skill-based hiring.
Yeah, very nice example, Janani. Sahil, also would like to know that is this more effective in case of early career talents? It is equally effective for the other roles. Second, this skill-based hiring is also used to assess your learning capacity for the future skills. So, overall, how do you see that how this works and how it is different from traditional hiring?
So first of all, Ramesh, thank you so much for having me back on your show. It's always a pleasure. Lovely to share this space with Janani. And I think, before I answer your question directly, I think referring to the report that you took a reference to in the opening of the session, when I went through the similar report and I actually read through the details, it's classic how the numbers play out, right? 88% of employers say that skill-based hiring reduces mishires. 82% of companies have reported a reduction in the total cost of hiring. 86% of employees say that skill-based hiring can help them land their dream job. And 76% of skill-based hires are happy in their role. Now, what a classic report, right? They have looked at it from multiple lenses, from an organization's point of view, from a cost point of view, from a candidate point of view, and more importantly, not just the candidate, but the overall happiness quotient. Fundamentally, what is happening today is, and you spoke about resumes right in the beginning of this conversation, so I'll pick up from there, Romesh. Resumes are actually dead. But what is really replacing a resume is a video CV. In a video CV, if you look at a lot of people who are also getting you to apply on LinkedIn, as a pre-screening questionnaire saying, can you upload a 60-second video where I can get to know 3 things? Number 1, who are you? Number 2, why do you want to apply to me? And number 3, what skills do you have to be successful in this role? Because at the end of it, you can write 2 sides or 2 pages or 10 pages of a CV, but ultimately, if I don't get that confidence as a recruiter that you'll be able to do the job well, or you're a cultural fit in my organization, I'm not going to shortlist you or hire you. Fundamentally, we've seen the shift towards skill-based hiring because, as Janani very correctly mentioned, you may have a lot of knowledge. You may have passed out from a tier 1 college. You may have had brilliant scores. But if all of that doesn't translate to getting the job done, it's going to be a problem. Gone are the days where we were okay if you knew the 4 different styles of swimming: freestyle, backstyle, butterfly, all of that. Today, I am saying, this is my swimming pool. The amount of chlorine in my swimming pool is different from the kind of swimming pools that you have actually participated in earlier. And therefore, what I want you to do is jump into the swimming pool and clock your best timing. And that essentially is about, Romesh, the skills that an individual brings to the table, not a certification that I would have done 5 years back. But even if it is 5 years ago, have I continuously upskilled myself to be relevant today? 1. 2, to be able to get the job done to the best of my potential and performance.
Right, you shared a couple of data that is very relevant data for this. Sahil, now let's move to for the implementation part. How you are going to implement this skill-based hiring? There are also certain agencies in a market, and you get some scoring part for the particular that may be digital skill, maybe for soft skill, hard. So many assessment agencies are there in the market. So how you adopt this skill-based hiring? What is the process?
So I think, Romesh, there are all kinds of people in the world. You have partnership firms, you have SMEs, MMSMEs, you have large multinationals, corporates, and everybody is at a very different level of maturity as far as their HR processes are concerned. And I think to cater to your entire audience that could be representative from each of these industries and their level of maturity, I think let's start with simplifying the whole concept. The most important aspect, very, very clearly, is to have what I call as a skill inventory. Do we really understand from a job specification, a job description point of view, what are the skills? And you mentioned some of them, whether they are technical skills or soft skills or leadership skills that you need an individual to possess. Are you able to map each of those skills to roles, not just job families, but also in the hierarchy? What would an executive in HR versus an AM in HR versus a associate director in HR versus a vice president HR need to have? It could be the same skill, but the degree could vary because you want to have people play that kind of a role at that kind of a level. The second important aspect, which many people don't do a great job of, is to describe the skill. From a Rubik's point of view, do you really understand what is an amateur, what is an intermediate, what is proficient or excellence in that skill? So you can make it very easy for even a non-HR person or a technical person who is interviewing a candidate to see in the entire spectrum, at what level is the candidate with regards to that specific skill. The third most important aspect is to actually very clearly demarcate what is a must-have skill and what is a good-to-have skill. Because many times what we end up doing is we bring in our own biases to say, oh, I am certified in this psychometric, and therefore I would want someone to have a similar certification. But the question that we need to answer is that certification relevant for the role that you're hiring that person, or are you bringing in your personal biases? And the fourth and most important is, how do you tie up all of this as a weightage to see, basis the role and basis the function, what weightage do you want to give to leadership skills, technical skills, and soft skills? Because at junior levels, you would definitely want someone to be far more technical and better at their job. And as they go higher, managing teams, managing the organization, looking at leadership skills becomes a lot more important. I'll take a pause here because I'm sure Janani would like to add on to this. But yes, this is just the tip of the iceberg. As you get inside, there is a lot of work to be done, and it's not easy feat to actually move and transform your organization from traditional ways of recruiting to skill-based recruiting.
Yeah. And Janani, what is your take on this, the implementation of skill-based hiring and the assessment?
Sahil very nicely articulated. I mean, he gave the lay of the land as to how you should approach this, right? In my experience, what's not spoken about is the mindsets of people. You will always have a set of people that have been there, done that, and they strongly believe that the way of hiring that they have followed for years is what will work out for the future as well. But what brought us here won't take us there. So it's very critical for us to help them understand, because see, we are also in a place where we have multi-generational workforce. We have 5 generations coexisting with each other, working with each other, and we need their skills as well. So how do we also take them along in the journey, convert them to skill-based hiring, or take their wisdom in few areas to say, okay, we will stay traditional for few roles. So it's clearly stepping back and asking which are those roles where we will go with skill-based hiring and which of those roles where we will go with traditional hiring. And for the merit of traditional hiring, because it has worked, maybe for few roles we continue that, right? Now, why is it an imperative for right now for us to move to skill-based hiring? Let's talk some big geographical facts. Overall, there is a demographic drop. Like the childbirth across the world is actually coming down. India is perhaps the only country that has 2.1 children per mother. To most of the countries are like 1 to 1.5. So there is an aging population. There is a serious scarcity of skills. Plus, let's look at skills half-life. It's coming down from, it was 5 to now it's 2.5. And for certain skills, it's much lesser. Then the third important aspect is the sheer number of newer skills that are coming in. It's just mind-boggling, and people are really struggling to cope up. Not to talk about the mental health issues that they are going through, just because of whether they'll stay relevant in future or not. Now, amidst all this, we will have to do skill-based hiring. So how do we do it? I think we'll have to convince people for the good of it, giving all of these reasons, and what's the business imperative? Because we'll need to run business. That's the reason why we want to do this. Second, it will just widely help us to get more talent pool, which we would have otherwise never tapped. I mean, to the example that I otherwise gave earlier, we just went and tapped into one company went and tapped into a talent pool that would have otherwise been unthought of, right? Necessity is the mother of invention, and that's what happened there. So that's a second aspect. And to Sahil's point, right, we should clearly know what do we want to assess. Is it technical skills, hard skills? Is it about psychological aspects or like emotional intelligence? Which level, what kind of assessments? Accordingly, also map assessments required when we want to hire. Plus, most importantly, to his point on skill inventory, I think we need to know who do we have currently. So we go and hire or train some people who can match the skills that we need for the future. So I think it's not a straightforward answer at all, Romesh. Hence, I think both of us gave aspects that will just bring this closer to implementation. But yes, it's clearly scratching the surface, and we have to have a long drawn journey.
I think, Ramesh, I also want to come back to the question that you asked earlier, which was to say, is this only for early talent or for everyone? I think many a times we have been guilty of looking at it from a standpoint of saying, oh, this is what recruitment needs to do or talent acquisition needs to do, and they do skill-based hiring. But if you actually look at Internet of Things or blockchain, you can think of it in such a beautiful manner as part of the change management exercise. 3 things that one can do that would be path breaking. Number 1, when you work with business to really develop the skill-based hiring, you actually show them how it can impact the entire talent life cycle. So it is not just skill-based hiring for recruiting, number 1. Number 2, you make it so easy for them to implement that they embrace it rather than resist the change. Otherwise, they will not join the bandwagon. And to do that, if you define each of the zones, whether it is amateur, intermediate, or advanced, or experienced, they just have to simply tick on that button and it describes it. Of course, if someone is very enthusiastic and wants to write comments, they can do that as well. And the third most important thing is, how does skill-based hiring feed into your manpower plan, feed into your career progression, feed into your succession planning to see where are the white spaces, where are people not, where am I losing people? If I'm losing a lot of people, do I have a skill deficit or do I have a skill surplus? Wherever I have a surplus, can I repurpose people to cross-skill themselves and pick up different roles? Wherever I have a deficit, can I hire more people at the bottom, skill them up, and then move them in? So this actually is an OD intervention. It's just that we've always thought of it as only recruitment. It isn't recruitment. Think of it like blockchain. It starts with recruitment, moves into L&D, moves into succession planning, and moves into OD. And that is the power of skill-based hiring.
Right. I think both of you also shared some of the deterrents, which are why the couple of companies are not, use it, the skill-based hiring. Even those companies which are using the skill-based hiring, so what is the scale there? That is also very important. So, of course, you have to first assess what are the future skills that you want to assess in a candidate, and also the talent pool, and so many other deterrents you already shared, Janani. Now we are moving toward the personality test. So that is also the part of this skill-based hiring. Sometimes we get a link from the company, and there are certain questionnaires. We have to fill up the questionnaires and send it to the company back again. How effective is this? The personality test, or you can say the psychometric test assessment.
Are they effective? Definitely, yes, they are effective. But why do we want to do it is the first question we need to ask. And I think we have to start with the why for anything that we want to do, Ramesh. So does the company want it for everyone, or does it need for certain roles? Is a fundamental question. Number 2, with whom are we going to do the psychometric testing is also very important, right? Like we need to identify someone who has done a stellar job with the right kind of parameters there for credible organizations already, especially if you're going to use it for leadership roles, right? So that's another important parameter. Third is what is important for the organization. Is that assessment tool that you are selecting, do they have some level of customization ability to ensure that aspects that are important for your organization are there as part of their tool, or you can add them, right? So that's another important factor that we need to consider. The final point that I would say is psychometric assessment will definitely give a lot around the individual, but what is it has to not be looked at individually or seen separately as a result. Sometimes it could be very different, and I've heard people who have come back and say, hey, I went through all the rounds, everything happened so well, something got screwed up in the psychometric round, and I don't know, my candidature didn't go through. So all I'm saying is the results have to be looked along with several other factors of how did the interview go through, what were the individual comments that came from the different interviewers, and beyond all of this, what's the human element saying about the individual's fitment into the organization? Because reports will say certain things, but then they cannot be taken as a 100% determinant for someone to get a job, especially if it is at a leadership level. So I would just say that it has to be a combination of factors when we are using psychometric assessments to hire somebody. We use 360 within the organizations, and they are for a totally different purpose. It's a form of psychometric as well. But there it is more about developmental. How are my peers looking at myself, and how are my seniors looking at myself? But I would just say this result can be an augmented result, especially if you're going to hire for senior levels. You can see what is the group lacking and what kind of emotional intelligence or aspects that could emerge in the psychometric assessment be a strength, added as a strength from the person who's coming in, right? I mean, those are my thoughts, but I will definitely be interested to see what Sahil has to say.
I would like to add here.
Sure. I think 2, 3 parallel perspectives here, right? Number one, every psychometric has a certain level of reliability and validity, right? And therefore, we should look at that. Second thought very clearly is you need to understand a lot of people latch onto this bandwagon of psychometrics without realizing which psychometric needs to be used for what process, right? If you're doing recruitment, you're not going to be looking at an MBTI, right? You will look at a Thomas, you will look at an OPQ, you will look at those kind of tests in that, or a DISC profiling, right? But that's very, very important. I think understanding which tool for what purpose. And the third is, I think wherever the role of a psychometric tool stops is where the role of a human being begins. I think this is a great enabler for us, but many a times we start looking at some of these psychometrics as the gospel truth. It isn't, because every human being is different. A lot of people are very intelligent and they know how to at least try and beat the tool. But the whole point remains that if you can use that as a feeder, saying, oh, this is what the report tells me about Romesh's personality. I think these are the 3 aspects of his nature that I need to probe into, that I need to dwell upon, that I need to validate myself by asking a couple of questions, having certain conversations. I think a lot of people today are not just relying on psychometric tools, Romesh, but are also trying to marry it with social media footprints to see what am I on social media, what am I in person when you're having a conversation with me, and what does the psychometric tell? And when there is a congruence or lack of it, it actually tells more about the individual than just one particular conversation would tell. So these are my 3 thoughts on psychometrics.
Yeah,
I
right.
have something to add to what Sahil just
Yeah,
said.
please.
The social media piece, you see, people are also becoming very much aware of it. Some of them put themselves they portray themselves in a certain way on LinkedIn, versus it's totally different on Insta, versus very different on a Twitter. So it's about how they are also trying to bring out their different personalities. So they are able to show what they want the world to see in them, right? That's one aspect. Similar to, again, to another point of what he said, the Deloitte used to do, they always do this business chemistry, right? Like it gives personalities of people. Now, you can't just take it on face value, because some people know very beautifully to tweak themselves in accordance to the person that they are talking to, and they can manage themselves well. So if you're just simply taking a personality report and then saying, oh, this is the personality and I don't want this person, then I think it's completely not done. We need to look at what is it that we need to get from the person, and is that person able to manage what's coming out as part of the personality report. I think those are very important, Ramesh. I just thought it's interesting. I wanted to add those perspectives.
Sahil, also, I would like to discuss a little more your experience on this skill part. So, skill, when we are talking about this skill-based hiring, so that also covers your leadership skill, that also covers your technical skill, that also covers your other skills. For which skill this is more effective? Is it more effective for the technical skills only, or that is also equally, effective for the leadership skills or other soft skills?
No, I think, Ramesh, it is more or less effective all across in my experience. I don't want to narrow it down to say where it is not, because ultimately, when you look at it from a skill perspective, and there is a slight differentiation, so maybe I'll take a minute or two to explain that from my perspective. Whenever it is a technical skill, it is extremely important because then you know the level of proficiency, right? Because how good, if person is looking at coding, you would exactly know in the entire process, where does the person get stuck? It's like level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, right? But when it comes to leadership, it isn't about as much of levels as it is about breadth, right? So at times, people also in leadership roles look at depth, but depth can still be managed if you have a very strong second line. In a sense, you're looking at breadth. So what do I mean by that? If I'm looking at evaluating a leader, I'm going to see how many kind of roles has the leader played. Has the leader worked in a multi-geography kind of environment? Has the person failed? When I say failed, has the person embraced early failure? How is the person bounced back? Has the person had an entrepreneurial stint where started up something on their own or not? Has the person worked across industries to get a flavor? Now, that is the breadth that I'm talking about in terms of evaluation of skill. Is the person able to plug and play to that extent? But when I'm looking at a much junior role, some of these things don't even matter. What really matters is, can the person crack the code? If I'm looking at a cyber specialist, can the person break through the firewall?
So, Janani, I think we have discussed that what is the skill-based
But
hiring,
otherwise, I would.
what is the importance of this, and how we will implement, and what are the deterrents as well. We have discussed about the skill-based hiring. Anything else would like to add, which is important and we did not cover here, Janani?
HR professionals and business leaders should actively start thinking about skill-based hiring if they've already not. If we are constantly going to think about, okay, this is the skill I need a Java full stack and I need exact 100% fitment, I don't think we are going to get anymore, because the skill demand equation, the supply demand equation is rapidly changing. And that is invariably also leading us to take different compensation decisions, because it's just hiking up for certain skills too much. We increase the base unwantedly, and then few months later that skill is not anymore needed and there is a new skill. I think it's just going all over, isn't it? So there is the implication. So it's very critical to know, first, who do we have in the organization? What kind of skills, what kind of competency levels? Can we train them for near skills? Do we have near skills professionals internally? Then go out and look for varieties of skills and varieties of modes as well. I mean, we did not talk about freelancers, and we did not talk about remote workers who are working across the world. I think there are now so many of these avenues available. So many people are also available. So you can clearly look at, okay, I need only 20 hours of work. Do I even need to hire a full-time employee? Can I get it done through somebody? Do I have to give the entire part of the work, or because of the skill, is it just this part that I need to give and get it done? Right? I think those are fundamental questions that business leaders and HR leaders need to sit and have a dialogue about, and then create a strategy for the organization in such a way that whatever is right for them, they start making it, but progressively improve on skill-based hiring. That's what I would say. And yes, with this, diversity and inclusion will naturally happen as well. So enhancing mindsets of people to become much more inclusive, and bringing that sense of belonging through policies that are inclusive. Like, you will have to reward varieties of people that are working with you, because you have hired them by virtue of your skill-based hiring strategy. So how would you think of it holistically is what I would leave the HR professional or a leader that's listening to this. Romesh, that's my concluding thought.
Right. And Sahil, what is your final comments?
Sure. I think, Romesh, we touched upon this slightly earlier in the conversation to talk about skill deficit and skill surplus. Think of it like a common analogy in economics. Whenever demand is high, supply is low, we all know what happens to price, right? Price goes up. And similarly, when supply becomes very high and demand goes low, price goes down. But it's not that easy when it comes to total rewards. So the most important aspect is, how do we really, as HR professionals, understand the game of compensation when it comes to skills? Today, a skill may be extremely hot. How is it that if you have a lot of clients demanding that skill, you're able to work out a compensation that is very attractive for people, not just to join you, but to also stay with you. And with the passage of time, how do you ensure that those same top performers, it's not just about a skill becoming redundant, it is also about the individual. And I think taking the individual, the organization, and the skill in as the three parts of the triangle and total rewards in the center is most important, because today a top performer who has a niche skill or a hot skill, tomorrow does that person become an average performer? Not really, right? And therefore, how is it that you invest in that individual to learn emerging technologies and skills, and at the same time build for white spaces to get filled within the organization rather than buy from outside? And the third most important point is, how do you manage the dilemma between fixed pay, variable pay, and premium on skills? I think that is not an easy one to crack, and maybe we'll need another 1 more hour to debate that on how do you work out those compensation strategies. But I think to summarize, total rewards for skill-based hiring and niche skills is a separate domain where we've not spent too much time, but I think that's a very important aspect apart from everything else that we've already discussed.
Nice, nice, very nice perspective, Sahil. So thank you so much, Sahil and Janani, for joining the conversation and sharing your wonderful thoughts. Thank you so much.